right? Here's something that'll make you sit up and pay attention. Tom Bower, Britain's most fearless investigative biographer, is preparing to drop another bombshell book about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And if his track record is anything to go by, this one's going to be absolutely explosive. But before we dive into what Bower's uncovered, let's talk about what's actually happening with the Sussexes right now, because the timing couldn't be more critical. Staff are fleeing Archewell like rats, abandoning a sinking ship. Their finances are in tatters, and insiders are whispering that we're watching a carefully constructed brand crumble in real time. Let's start with the latest crisis that's got everyone talking. Just as 2025 drew to a close, Harry and Meghan lost not one, but two of their most senior staff members. And we're not talking about junior assistants here. These were people who knew the Sussexes inside and out. First up, James Holt. Now, Holt wasn't just any employee. He'd been with Harry for nearly a decade, witnessing firsthand the toxic breakdown of relations between the Sussexes and the rest of the royal family. He was there at Windsor Castle on their wedding day in May 2018. He guided them through that infamous Oprah Winfrey interview in March 2021. By all accounts, one of their most loyal soldiers. And now, he's packing up his young family and heading back to Britain. The official line is that he wants to be closer to family. But royal watchers aren't buying it. When someone who's been that deeply embedded in the Sussex operation suddenly decides to put 5,000 miles between himself and his employers, you have to wonder what he's seen. Then there's Ashley Hansen, their global head of communications. She's gone to... And this is where it gets really interesting, because Hansen was brought in specifically to rehabilitate their image after years of PR disasters. She lasted barely any time at all before deciding she'd had enough. If you're enjoying this deep dive into what's really happening behind the palace walls, make sure you subscribe to Royal Daily Report. We bring you the stories the mainstream media won't touch, with analysis that cuts through the spin. Now, this exodus isn't happening in isolation. Over the past few years, at least 18 members of staff have walked away from working with Harry and Meghan. 18, that's not normal turnover. That's a pattern. And it's a pattern that screams one thing. Working for the Sussexes is an absolute nightmare. Former staff members, speaking anonymously to various publications, have painted a picture of a workplace where demands are unreasonable. Expectations are constantly shifting, and criticism flows freely whilst praise is virtually non-existent. One former employee described Meghan as someone who emails at all hours, expecting instant responses. Another said working for her was like being in a constant state of fight or flight. But here's where Tom Bower comes into the picture. Because Bower doesn't just rely on anonymous sources. This is a man who spent months investigating Meghan for his 2022 book Revenge, Meghan, Harry, and the War Between the Windsors. He interviewed over 80 people. He dug through court documents, business records, and private correspondence. And what he found painted a picture of Meghan Markle that was very different from the narrative she'd been selling to the world. Bower's previous work revealed a woman who was calculating, ambitious, and willing to manipulate anyone who stood between her and what she wanted. He exposed how she'd systematically distanced Harry from his friends, his family, and anyone who might question her influence over him. He documented how she'd rewritten her own history, airbrushing out inconvenient truths about her past relationships and her ruthless climb up the Hollywood ladder. And now, Bower's back. And this time, he's got access to even more sources. People who've worked with the Sussexes since they moved to California. People who've seen the reality behind the carefully curated Instagram posts and the glossy Netflix documentaries. According to publishing insiders, Bower's new book will focus on what he calls the Sussexes. Catastrophic miscalculation of their value outside the royal family. They thought they could have it both ways. Keep the titles, keep the prestige, but ditch the duties and the scrutiny. They were wrong. The financial reality is brutal. Their Spotify deal, worth a reported $100 million, collapsed after they delivered just 12 episodes of Meghan's podcast. Spotify executive Bill Simmons called them grifters. On his own podcast, their Netflix contract is up for renewal. And industry sources say the streaming giant is having serious second thoughts about whether the Sussexes can actually deliver content that people want to watch. For all the latest revelations and expert analysis on the royal family, hit that subscribe button for Royal Daily Report. We're your source for the truth behind the headlines. Bower is also reportedly examining the Sussexes charitable foundation, Archewell. On paper, it sounds impressive. But when you look at the actual financials that have been made public, the picture is less flattering. The foundation has been criticized for spending more on salaries and expenses than on actual charitable work. Questions have been raised about where exactly the money is going and what tangible difference it's making. Then there's the hypocrisy angle, which Bauer has always been brilliant at exposing. Harry and Meghan lecture the world about climate change whilst jetting around on private planes. They demand privacy whilst selling intimate details of their lives to the highest bidder. They claim to want to heal the rift with the royal family whilst simultaneously briefing against them in the media. Bauer's sources suggest that Harry, in particular, is deeply unhappy with how things have turned out. He's isolated in Montecito, cut off from the military connections and charitable work that gave his life meaning. His relationship with his brother William is reportedly beyond repair. His father, King Charles, has limited their contact to formal, carefully managed conversations. And Meghan? Well, according to Bauer's research, she's furious that Hollywood hasn't embraced her the way she expected. She thought she'd be dining with the Spielbergs and the Clooneys, attending premieres and award shows, being treated like royalty. Instead, she's been largely frozen out by an industry that sees her as toxic and high-maintenance. The timing of Bauer's book couldn't be worse for the Sussexes. They're trying to relaunch their brand, trying to convince the world that they're serious philanthropists and content creators. But Bauer's investigation threatens to expose the rot at the heart of their operation. What's particularly damaging is Bauer's reputation. He's not some tabloid hack looking for a quick payday. He's a serious investigative journalist who's taken down everyone from Robert Maxwell to Simon Cowell. When Tom Bauer writes something, people pay attention, and they believe it. The whisper from publishing circles is that Bauer has uncovered new details about the Megxit negotiations. About exactly what was said in those final meetings at Sandringham in January 2020, he's got testimony from palace staff about what really happened in the lead-up to the wedding, contradicting many of the claims Meghan made to Oprah. He's also apparently got fresh information about Meghan's relationships with her own family, particularly her father, Thomas Markle, and her half-sister, Samantha. The narrative Meghan has pushed is that she's the victim, that her family are money-grabbing opportunists. But Bauer's sources tell a different story, one where Meghan systematically cut people out of her life the moment they were no longer useful to her. Perhaps most explosively, Bauer is said to have new details about the allegations of bullying that emerged from Kensington Palace staff. You'll remember that several of Meghan's former aides made formal complaints about her behavior. The palace launched an investigation, but the results were never made public. Bauer claims to have spoken to people who participated in that investigation, and what they told him is devastating. Don't miss any of these crucial updates. Subscribe to Royal Daily Report now and join our community of royal watchers who demand the unvarnished truth. Now, some people will say this is all just a hit job, that Bauer has an axe to grind against Meghan. But that's too simplistic. Bauer goes where the evidence takes him. He's written critical biographies of Boris Johnson, Tony Blair, and Prince Charles himself. He's an equal opportunity investigator. The real question is, what happens when this book comes out? The Sussexes have already threatened legal action against newspapers and authors before. But suing Tom Bauer would be a massive risk. It would mean discovery, depositions, witnesses testifying under oath. It could expose even more than the book itself. More likely, we'll see the usual playbook. Friendly journalists will be briefed that Bauer is a bitter old man with outdated views. Meghan's PR team will push stories about her humanitarian work and her loving relationship with Harry. There'll be carefully staged photo opportunities showing them looking blissfully happy. But here's the thing. The public's not stupid. They can see what's happening. The endless staff departures, the failed business ventures, the constant contradictions between what the Sussexes say and what they do. Tom Bauer's book won't tell people anything they haven't already suspected. It'll just provide the receipts. And that's what makes this so significant. For years, Meghan has controlled her own narrative. She's had sympathetic journalists at publications like Vogue and The Cut, who've presented her exactly as she wants to be seen. She's had Netflix give her a platform to tell her version of events without meaningful challenge. Tom Bauer represents something different. He represents accountability. He represents the uncomfortable truth that you can't just reinvent yourself and expect everyone to go along with it. That your past catches up with you eventually. The real tragedy here isn't what this means for Harry and Meghan's public image. It's what it means for Harry himself. By all accounts, he's a man who's trapped. He's burned his bridges with his family, alienated his old friends, and tied himself to a woman who many believe has led him down a path he'll come to regret. Bower's book will likely explore this dynamic in painful detail. The way Meghan isolated Harry convinced him that his family were the enemy, that the British media were out to destroy them, that their only option was to flee to California and build a new life. But that new life hasn't worked out the way they promised it would. They're not happier. They're not more fulfilled. They're not making the difference they claimed they wanted to make. Instead, they're stuck in a gilded cage of their own making, desperately trying to remain relevant whilst the world slowly loses interest. So what happens next? Well, when Bower's book drops, expect a media firestorm. Expect wall-to-wall coverage, explosive headlines, and intense scrutiny of every claim. Expect the Sussexes to fight back hard. But also expect the public to finally get some answers to questions that have been lingering for years. Because ultimately, this is about more than just Harry and Meghan. It's about truth versus spin, accountability versus celebrity privilege, and whether you can really escape your past by simply moving to a different country and hiring better PR people. Tom Bower's betting that you can't, and based on everything we're seeing right now, with staff fleeing and deals collapsing and the Sussex brand in freefall, he might just be right.